Our favorite foods app is reading records from the database, and we run it and we can hit display and we can see this delicious chocolate pie, but that's the only thing we can see. There's nowhere to go from here. So we are going to implement a scrolling feature so we can see all the records in our database. In this particular situation, we have 3 records in our data table. We have the chocolate pie, guacamole, and beef shawarma, but we can currently only see the chocolate pie. So let's go to the design tab and add an image that can function as a scrolling image. So we'll grab this image screen element and let's make it a nice 50 by 50 square, and we'll tuck it in the lower right hand corner there. I know the X position of 270 plus 50 puts it right at the right edge, and I know that if we give it a Y position of 400, then 400, the bottom of the screen is 450, so 400 plus 450 tucks it right at the bottom edge. The right edge of the screen is 320, so 270 plus 50 puts it right at the right edge. And let's give it a meaningful name. We're going to call this the right scroll arrow. And we're going to grab in this image property, we'll click choose, and we're going to get from the icons tab, we're going to get this right arrow icon, this font awesome arrow right, and that shows up there. And we're going to do something a little bit tricky. We're going to hide it. So that arrow is going to be hidden. And when we run our app, it's not going to show up unless there's more than one record in the database. So let's go to our code and we'll read records. And the first thing we're going to check after we display our delicious chocolate pie is if records dot length. If the length of that records array is greater than 1, then that means we want the scrolling feature. So we're going to set the property of our right scroll area, scroll arrow, right scroll arrow. We're going to set the hidden property to false. Right now it's true, so it's hidden. So if the records.length, length, is greater than 1, then we'll set the property of that right scroll arrow. We'll set the hidden property to false. So we reset it and we run it and we display, and there's our arrow. Of course, if we click on it, nothing happens because we haven't wired that up. So let's throw an on event on here. We can actually go outside the if. We can say, we'll show our toolbox so we can grab an on event. We'll grab the on event code block and we'll connect it to the right scroll arrow by putting right scroll arrow into the ID. And what do we want to happen? When we click that right arrow, well, we want to display, instead of the first item in the records array, we want to display the next item in the records array. So let's Command C to copy all of this setting information to the screen, and then we'll Command V to put it in the on event. And our code's getting really complicated here. We're inside the display button on event. We're inside the read records call. And now we're inside the right scroll arrow on event. So we want to be really careful with our indentation to show, hey, this is inside the right scroll arrow on event, and we'll clean this up. So when we click the right scroll arrow, instead of showing the first item, first object in the records array, we want to show the next item. So the item at index 1, the object at index 1, which is going to be our appetizer, our guacamole. So let's try it. So we run it and we display, and there's more than one record in the database. So we get a scroll arrow and we can scroll off of chocolate pie to guacamole. But that's as far as we can go. We're not seeing our delicious beef shawarma. So I think you guys can kind of see what's going on here is we hard-coded index 1. So we first show the first thing in the records array at index 0. That makes sense. And then when we click the right scroll arrow, we're showing the next thing at index 1. But we can click this as many times as we want, and it's always going to show the records at index 1. But we want to vary this. We want this to change every time we click. So we need a variable. So this variable, let's create an index variable. We'll call it var index, and we'll start it at 0. And down here, instead of showing 1 each time, let's increment index each time we click the on event, the right scroll arrow on event. So index equals index plus 1, or we could do index plus equals 1, or we could just do the quickest of all, which is index. I'm sorry, that last one would be index plus equals. Plus equals has to be together. Or we can do the easiest one, which is index plus plus. That'll increment index by 1. And then instead of showing what's at index 1 each time, let's show what's at records index variable. So we'll be able to change this. We'll be able to increment this each time we click the right scroll arrow on event. Our index will increase, and it's going to show the next thing in the records array. So we run it, and we display, and we see our chocolate pie, and then we see our guacamole, and then we click it again, and this index increments, and we're seeing what's at index 2, 0, 1, 2, which is the beef shawarma. And great. Now, if we click this again, index is going to increment to 3. There is nothing at 0, 1, 2. There is nothing at array index 3. So when we try to set the text of the food label to records 3.foodname, we're going to get an error. So if we click this, sure enough, we get an error on line 53, which is right there. It tried to set this food label to index 3. There is nothing at index 3. There's just 0, 1, 2. So one of the last things we need to do to make our sweet little scroll feature is we have to say if index is greater than or equal to records dot length -1, then we need to hide that arrow so that we don't click it again and get an error. Shift Command C, and we're just going to paste this set property, and we're going to make the hidden, instead of false, we'll make the hidden true. So index, we start at 0, we increment to 1, we increment to 2, and if that's greater than or equal to records.length, which is 3 minus 1, if that's greater than or equal to 2, then stop. There's nothing else in the array. We don't need to show the arrow. Let's hide the arrow so we don't click on it and get an error. And the tricky thing here is, why is it records.length -1? Well, think it through. Records.length is 3, but the index of the array starts at 0, 1, 2. So if the index is 1 less than the length, then that means you're on the last item. Hide the arrow. Let's see if it works. We run it. We display. We see our delicious chocolate pie, our guacamole, and our beef shawarma, and there's no arrow, so we can't click anymore. And it's working. So we have a scroll feature. The last tiny thing is there's nowhere to go from here. We're at the end. We have to reset the app. Let's give the user the opportunity to go back to the home screen. And that's very easy. We can just go to the Design tab and our display screen, and we'll just put a little button here. Let's make it like, I don't know, let's give it a height 20. Let's cut it in half. So its height is 20 and its width is 50. And we'll call this the home button. And we'll say that the text should indicate that this button will take you home. And let's give it a color. Let's just make it a nice dark green so it kind of goes with our page. And it looks like the text, maybe we could shrink that a little bit, make it 13. There we've got our home button. I don't know, maybe it's a little small, we could play with it. But we go back to the code and we should say, if you ever click the on event home button, that should take you to the home screen. So we'll just open the toolbox and grab an on event, drop that in and change the ID to home_button. And if we click that home button, then set screen to the home screen. There is no such thing as the home screen. There's just screen 3. But I think this name has outlived its usefulness. Let's call this guy the home screen. and we'll go to the Design tab, and we'll rename that screen. We'll give it a new ID. We'll call it the home_screen, and go back to our code. And I think we have it in here too. Let's clean it up and say home_screen. And we'll run it, and we display. There's our button. We can scroll. We can get out of here. We have a scroll feature in our Favorite Foods app. All right, thanks for watching. Happy coding.